From the Times and the Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Manveen Rana.
So I went back the other day, a couple of days ago, and listened to one of my favourite conservative podcasts called The Editors. It's done by National Review.
Donald Trump speaks and speaks and speaks some more. Joe Biden teeters and JD Vance arrives. We'll discuss all this and more on this edition of The Editors. I'm Rich.
And I went back and listened to the pod they put out just after the RNC, the Republican National Convention, and the tone was astonishing.
Charlie, I've been here in Milwaukee all week. I will say it's the most unified and upbeat convention I've ever experienced.
The discussion then was, is this race over? And they felt that Biden, who was then still the Democratic nominee, was dead in the water, that Trump could sweep a landslide.
I was at an event yesterday where a really well-placed Trump person who's going to have a high-level position in the White House, there's no doubt about it, was just saying there's a spirit, God is looking over Donald Trump and looking over what we're doing here, and everyone in the room absolutely believes that.
You felt then this thing is not over, but Trump's way ahead. The polls had him way ahead, and a sense that all the momentum and energy was with them. And so it's remarkable, really, that here we are barely 4 weeks later, and it's almost a completely different perspective from which we're looking at the race.
Four weeks and a dizzying news cycle later, the race for the White House looks completely different. As Kamala Harris's campaign rides on a wave of momentum, Donald Trump seems to be fighting to find a foothold. The story today: why Trump is struggling against Harris.
My name is Josh Glancy. I'm editor of News Review at the Sunday Times. Prior to that, I was Washington correspondent and New York correspondent, and I covered both the 2016 and the 2020 elections, so developed a sort of bit of a master's thesis in all things Donald Trump.
And Josh, we spoke to you just 4 weeks ago about Donald Trump and about his pick for the VP. It does feel like a lot has changed since then, namely the Democrat ticket, the person he's going to be up against. Things seem to be going better than anyone, even the Democrats, had expected for Kamala Harris.
Yeah, I would before we delve into Kamala Harris, I would just say the speed of this news cycle is unlike anything I've ever encountered before. I was there for some of the 2016, 2017 news cycles when Trump fired FBI Director James Comey, or when James Comey announced his investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails, the Russian hacks. I mean, there were some pretty dramatic moments. Nothing has come close. Not even The West Wing, a sort of fictional television series about the American presidency, has really come close to what we saw play out in July with the attempted assassination and then Biden stepping down in consecutive weekends. So it really is astonishing. You do have to pinch yourself at times.
It's a weekly cliffhanger. It's like a season finale every other day.
Quite. And then what happened next also was astonishing and happened at rapid speed, which was Harris was anointed before we could even blink. And Democrats rallied around her in a quite astonishing way. There was a real sense of catharsis for them.
Kamala.
Hello. Hi.
Hey there.
Oh, hi. You're both together. Oh, it's good to hear you both.
I can't have this phone call without saying to my girl Kamala, I am proud of you. This is going to be historic.
I think she stands with the real possibility of winning this election and maybe winning it with a big vote.
We called to say Michelle and I couldn't be prouder to endorse you and to do everything we can to get you through this election and into the Oval Office.
A different messenger, a different style, a different approach, and people are clearly really fired up and excited about it. I know I am.
Clearly there was a lot of pent-up energy, and that has been released. And it's been amazing to watch. And I think it has taken everyone a little bit by surprise. And she is, in some ways, being painted as the female Barack Obama, as the face of a new, diverse, forward-looking America. And they've got a candidate again. And suddenly the other guy looks old. We've seen him before. You know that famous old line, there are no second acts in American life. I think it's F. Scott Fitzgerald. Suddenly you wonder, well, hang on, does they want to go backwards? And the Harris campaign's been very good at capitalizing on that energy. And one of their taglines is,
We are not going back. These extremists want to take us back, but we are not going back. We are not going back. And like we all know, we're not going back.
They are very good with those taglines, with the attacks on Trump. How is Trump responding to Harris, though? This is not the election he was expecting.
I think you can sum up Trump's response in one word, which is sulking. He is furious. He's been very rude about her behind her back, in private, I should say, calling her all sorts of nasty things. He feels like he's been cheated, and this has become a source of great upset for him. He feels like he was all ready to beat Biden. He had his plan, he had his attack lines. It was all sewn up. And now he's got this new proposition and he's been unable to pivot. He hasn't had the kind of intellectual or mental dexterity to say, okay, this has happened. This new energy, this new force is arrayed against me. What do we do? Instead, he's been blaming people. He's been complaining. He's been arguing the toss.
He keeps bringing Biden up again in every speech, as if that's the election he wishes he was fighting.
It started really with the debate. It was all, the game was up. They say the jig was up. And it was indeed up. But it started with that. And then it only got worse. And we were leading him by 11, 12, 14, 15 points. And then he decides to get out because the bosses said, we're not going to have you. He didn't want to get out, but they told him, you're getting out.
He doesn't seem to have worked out an attack line that sticks for Kamala Harris.
She's got a new line, She's going, I'm the prosecutor. She's one of the worst prosecutors in history. She destroyed San Francisco. I'm the prosecutor, and he's the convicted felon or something. That's their campaign. I don't think people are going to buy it. And we won our big case. We won the case in Florida.
No, I mean, he's tried lying Kamala, but it's not really clear what she's lied about. I guess maybe she played a role in people not being open about Joe Biden's condition, but I don't think it's really stuck. He's tried to tell us that she's not really black.
Yeah.
Which he said to the Association of Black Journalists, and it did not go well.
I just defined it, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a black woman?
Well, I can say, no, I think it's maybe a little bit different. So I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much. And she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She is always identified as a black woman. She went to a historically black college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't.
Fundamentally, I just think it's such a massive turnoff for moderates, for swing state voters, people of diverse backgrounds, of whom there are many in America, to see that kind of line. They have dropped that, I think. They did try for a couple of days to get that one going. It's just bombed. So, yeah, he's been fumbling about for an attack line and hasn't really got there yet.
At the same time, the Democrats really do seem to have got their campaign going. Not only do they have a new candidate, but they have some pretty effective attack lines, particularly the word weird.
Yeah, the weird thing came from a Tim Walz interview, the governor of Minnesota, who's now Harris's running mate. And I think this interview is part of the reason he got the job, really, which is he landed on this attack line. Well, they're just weird. They're odd guys, Vance, JD Vance and Donald Trump.
It's oddly effective.
It is. It's very playground, isn't it? You're a weirdo. I don't think it's a particularly elevated form of politics, frankly, but we are where we are. And it does seem to have cut through. Because, I mean, Donald Trump is one of the most bizarre human beings I've ever encountered.
Silence of the Lambs. Has anyone ever seen a Silence of the Lambs? The late, great Hannibal Lecter is a wonderful man. He oftentimes would have a friend for dinner. Remember the last scene? Excuse me, I'm about to have a friend for dinner as this poor doctor walked by. I'm about to have a friend for dinner, but Hannibal Lecter, congratulations, the late, great Hannibal Lecter. We have people that are being released into our country that we don't want in our country.
I think a lot of people do find him quite weird. And it's one of those, it captures quite a lot in one word.
And it's one of those things that has sort of been normalised. We'd all stopped even noticing how weird he is until it's just pointed out in a very simple way.
I think that's a really good point. I think it's served to remind us that, as the old phrase that was used a lot in the first Trump administration went, this is not normal. And I do think a craving for normality is the Democrats' best bet in this election.
And while Trump doesn't seem to have got the perfect attack line against Kamala Harris yet, he also hasn't got the perfect defense against the weird description. I think apparently he's been telling donors that Democrats aren't calling him weird, they're calling JD Vance weird, which is apparently somehow better. This is his candidate to be vice president. I mean, is he regretting the decision? Just take us back to 4 weeks ago. And what was his thinking in selecting JD Vance?
Yeah, again, I love just saying how juvenile it is to say, oh no, it's not me, it's the little wiener next to me. It's all utterly playground, isn't it? But look, I don't think the Trump campaign, is in dire straits by any means at the moment. But, if you go back to the decision of choosing Vance, that was done in a moment of great confidence, one almost might say arrogance, even hubris, because Vance was never a big tent pick. Normally you pick a VP to reach out to a certain group, to make nice, to fortify your coalition.
To bring in swing states.
To bring in swing voters, to appeal to a certain demographic, perhaps women, perhaps minorities. Whereas Vance was always really about doubling down on MAGA. He was a movement choice. We were talking a few weeks ago about how you could see Vance taking over from Trump and becoming his successor, that he would be the kind of standard bearer for what Trump has built. He picked him mainly in response to lobbying from his sons, Eric and Don Jr., who are ideologues. They're part of that MAGA movement, and they're personally friends with JD Vance. And so it was a slightly hubristic pick of someone who thought that he had an election in the bag. And I wouldn't be surprised, I'm speculating here, that the sense of euphoria having survived someone shooting an AR-15 bullets at his head probably did make him think, you know what, screw it. I'll choose the guy who's ideologically loyal to me. I don't have to make nice with some compromise candidate.
Yeah, you definitely feel like luck is on your side.
Certainly.
We've had 4 weeks now of JD Vance really being introduced on the national stage. How's that been going?
I think he had a few stumbles at first. I think it's been a pretty mixed bag overall. He made a very weird joke early on about how drinking Diet Mountain Dew, we'd get accused of racism or something. And that bombed. And he looked a bit uncomfortable. Having spent time with JD Vance, he is quite awkward in his own skin. He's quite big. He can be a bit sort of, almost feel like a sort of lumbering bear at times. He didn't look entirely comfortable on that stage. But overall, I think he's done all right. He's quite good at putting a coherent spin on some of the mental stuff that Trump says, being a kind of explainer. And the
translator.
A translator, exactly. The biggest problem he's had is something he said in 2021 to Fox News host, or then Fox News host Tucker Carlson, which was a comment about childless cat ladies.
We're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children.
That obviously isn't something he said during the current campaign, but that hit him pretty hard early on.
And just describe the response there's been to that, now that that's sort of resurfaced.
Yeah, I mean, everyone from Jennifer Aniston to Taylor Swift weighed in on, I guess, the nasty, seemingly sexist tone of those comments. It really triggered a very wide and quite angry response.
I'm not asking you because it's making news. I'm asking you more because people are calling me who very much would like to support you and President Trump. Dr. Connie Rice does not have children. Neither does my friend, your colleague, Tim Scott. George Washington did not have biological children, and neither did James Madison. So I think you will agree with me that direct offspring are not necessary to be fully invested in the future of this country.
Of course not, Trey. I do think that being a parent actually has a profound effect on somebody's perspective, and we should honor and respect that. But there are a whole host of people who don't have children for a whole host of reasons, and they certainly are great people who can participate fully in the life of this country, and that's not what I said, Trey.
The way he's tried to explain it is by saying, look, I wasn't having a go at people who don't have kids. Obviously, some people can't have kids. I'm saying that the Democratic Party has become anti-family, anti-children, and its policies and its posture are antithetical to the family values I believe in. That sort of half tracks. I think the problem is it's the cruelty of the tone and the language, which is so unnecessary. And it speaks to the fact that he was with Tucker Carlson. He was showing off. He was trying to please base voters in Ohio at the time. He was running for the Senate. And he spends too much time online where people throw insults around like that without a second thought. But replayed on TV, now that he's the vice presidential nominee, it just seemed odd and nasty. And I think it did him some damage.
And there have been other weird parts of the campaign. I mean, there's a strange rumor about a couch and something about dolphin porn. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff is, again, it has that bullying vibe to it. It is getting very playground at times. And I'm not sure the Republicans are concerned because they have nominated Donald Trump, who is the OG bully, we might say. But the Democrats used to say, when they go low, we go high. That was Michelle Obama's famous line. Well, that's not how it plays out anymore. They've been going pretty low. So both of these things are basically made up. That one is someone literally made up an allegation that a sort of rumor that JD Vance fornicated with a sofa. And someone else basically accused him of searching for dolphin porn online. Neither's true. And I think the people who do spend a lot of time telling us about misinformation and how much of a liar Donald Trump is should maybe not traffic in such rumors, because there have been Democratic politicians spreading this stuff. And I think it's pretty unseemly.
So, Josh, it's been a challenging few weeks for the Trump campaign. The Democrats, on the other hand, have had a few good news cycles. They've had some stories out which have really given them some momentum. How is that actually playing out in terms of polling? Do we know if it's affecting particularly those key swing states where this election will be decided?
So Kamala's ahead. Nate Silver, the pollster of pollsters, has the Oracle Nate Silver, and you can read an interview with him in this week's Sunday Times Magazine by yours truly. But Nate Silver has his model at 53, Harris 47, Trump. So ahead, but not out of sight by any means.
But that is a switch from the Biden days.
Oh yeah, big time. I mean, as far as Silver was concerned, it was over for Biden. Basically what's happened is a lot of the undecideds in America have switched. Lots of people have their choice baked in, but a lot of the undecideds have switched. And we've seen some recent polling from the New York Times that's shown Harris 4 points ahead in all of the three key blue wall states.
Where was Biden in those?
Biden was behind by the time he stepped down. He was about 3 or 4 points behind by the time he stepped down. Harris is now 4 points up in each of those, according to this one New York Times poll.
Wow.
So again, that's, given how partisan the country is, that's a lot of undecided voters switching. And people, as they say, coming home to the Democrats, people who'd sort of given up on Biden or were fed up, coming back into the Democratic camp. You know, 4 points is, again, by no means out of sight. It's just out of the margin of error, which is usually 3. But it's good news. particularly Pennsylvania and particularly Michigan, where there was a lot of frustration over Biden's stance on Gaza.
So that's a complete switch. And Pennsylvania has an awful lot of seats, a lot of
electoral college votes. So they'll be feeling quietly confident. But they've got the Democratic National Convention coming up, so they can expect another boost from that. It'll be interesting to see what the polls do after that. But then there are 2 months of hard, real campaigning to come, and Trump may be able to regain his balance, shall we say. So
still a long way to go.
A long way to go, yeah.
What do you think is driving, the switching of votes? Is it just that people had no confidence in Biden? They thought he was too old. Now they're suddenly licensed. They can vote for the Democrats without worrying about Biden's age.
I think that's the vast bulk of it, yeah. I think Biden, the moment he had that disastrous debate with Trump where he rambled and stumbled, a lot of people watched that debate, over 20 million, I think, and it was terrible. And it was clear that this guy couldn't do another 4 years in the White House. And it was very straightforward. And anyone who was denying that at that point was lying to themselves. So I think that's the vast majority of it. Harris is a younger, more dynamic candidate. So as you say, you have a license to vote for her again. And it's shifted the energy back in that direction. And there has been this sort of proliferation of memes, this huge kind of online energy behind Harris. There was the whole rather regrettable kind of brat summer situation, which we're now thankfully past. But, there was...
Not a fan, Josh.
Don't get me started. It was this great excitement. But, and here's where I would caveat it, it's not really based on much substance. Yes, she is younger than Trump. Yes, she is a fresher face than Trump. Yes, she's less weird than Trump, one might say. But she hasn't really got a particularly good track record. So there is a chance that gravity reasserts itself on Harris over time, because there are bigger hurdles ahead in terms of proving to the country that she's ready for the big job.
She has had this great fillip of support, this great sort of sense of momentum from being the new person who's come in. For Trump, though, he sees this almost as a conspiracy. Why does he think she's doing so well?
Well, I think he would attribute a lot of it to media bias, really, and to the thumbs of power being sort of put on her side of the scales. There has, in fairness to Trump, there has been quite astonishing media rally. Not all the media, obviously, but a lot of the big mainstream media institutions in America, which do lean liberal, have rallied around Harris to quite an astonishing degree. I think there was a cover of New York Magazine that was Camelot, which is obviously a reference to JFK's Camelot. This is quite excitable stuff, and I think it's reasonable for them to point that out. But at a certain point, you're just arguing the toss. We know that these institutions favour the Democrats. Republicans have their own conservative media universe. And
Tucker Carlson, Fox News, Truth Social, Trump's own platform. This is all...
And X, for that matter, now, is by no means biased against them anymore because of Elon Musk's control of it. So at a certain point, you just have to play the hand you're dealt. I do also think that media adulation will wear off to some extent. Harris has not given a proper interview yet. Journalists don't like politicians that don't give interviews.
True.
They do, people, the majority of them will want Harris to win. So there's a slight tension there. But I don't think she can duck scrutiny all the way to November.
So there are less than 80 days to go until the election. At this stage, what do you think Trump and his campaign can do to try and reverse that momentum? Is there any chance they ditch their VP and find a new one? Or what are the tactics they should be looking to?
I think it would look pretty drastic to ditch the VP. And I don't think he's that much of a disaster that they really need to do anything like that. The argument you hear from Republicans I've spoken to and from the sort of old-fashioned Republicans is that they need to run an old-fashioned Republican campaign, which is she's too liberal, she's soft on crime, she's soft on the border, she's soft on cultural war issues like the trans issue, she's going to come and steal your guns, or that she's going to take your taxes and spend them all on useless entitlement programs. And these are well-worn talking points, but she is quite liberal. She does have a faulty record on the border. She's criticised the border enforcement agencies. She's criticised policing in America. She's come out of liberal California. where she was admittedly quite a tough prosecutor. But there is a clear attack line on Harris that's waiting to be skied down, if you like. But Trump doesn't seem to have the discipline or the wherewithal to do it at the moment. He's kind of blowing it, as the Wall Street Journal said the other day. Whereas I think if he can regain his balance, I think it will be a really, really tight race.
As you said at the start, it has felt like the last few weeks have just been one crisis, one cliffhanger after the other. Still a way to go. What are the potential stumbling blocks? What are the potential moments we should be looking out for?
Well, we have the DNC this week, of course, which will be obviously a coronation and a moment of celebration for the Democrats. We then have a debate scheduled for the 10th of September, which Trump has ummed and ahed about but agreed to, which is going to be really interesting. I mean, he's been in this environment more than she has. She can come across as a bit inauthentic and insincere in debates. He can often look quite hectoring and bullying and menacing, particularly towards women. If you remember the famous, when he sort of walked across the stage towards Hillary Clinton in 2016.
And behind her.
Very ominously. It was a very odd moment. One of many. So that will be a really interesting moment. I think everyone will want to tune in for that debate. Harris will have to give some big set-piece speeches. She probably will have to do some interviews. There's jeopardy for her there. And then there's what Donald Rumsfeld called the sort of unknown unknowns. I mean, who could have predicted some of the things that have happened in the last few weeks? So who knows what drama might be coming our way.
That was Josh Glancy, news review editor for the Sunday Times and oracle on all things Vance and Trump. Do have a look at his fascinating interview with the other oracle, Nate Silver, in the Sunday Times magazine. We'll put a link in the description to this podcast. This episode was produced by Taryn Siegel. The executive producer was Fiona Leach, and sound design and theme tune were by Mal Lassetto. If you have any thoughts on what you've just heard or any ideas for subjects you'd like us to cover in the future, then do drop us a line to thestory@thetimes.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, do leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening. See you again soon.